Welcome to Spicy Toast Gaming and our updated Jax guide for Path of Champions. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. First, we're going to start off with a brief overview of the champion, discussing their general playstyle so you have a better understanding of the champion and if you want to invest your time and resources into them. First up, we have equipment. The main focus of the Jax deck is using equipped units. Next up, we have improvise. The main way the units in the Jax deck get equipment is from the improvise mechanic, which generates random equipment for the unit to select upon playing them. Next we have one-man army. While Jax does have a strong deck with good units, you can focus purely on Jax and have him solo most encounters. Up next we have aggressive early. Nearly every card in the Jax deck is 3 cost or less, which allows you to put a lot of pressure on the enemy early. Next up we have built-in draw. With having so many cheap cards, it would be easy to run out. But Jax has some draw built into his star powers, so that doesn't happen. Last up, we have crazy scaling. Despite being an early game deck, Jax and his units are able to scale up quite quickly. Alright, that's it for the overview. Let's hop in game to better explain some of the points we touched on here. Here we are in game. We have Jax at level 30 with the 3 stars. Jax himself, 2-star champion or 2-cost champion, with a 3-2 as far as stats, and then when you play him, auto-equip the Light of Acacia, so you see that right here. Equipment with no stats, but does have quick attack, and then once Jax is leveled up, the Light also gets Overwhelm. So Jax himself doesn't have quick attack on his card, but he normally will have quick attack because of the equipment that normally you have on him. You can unequip that if you want, but normally you're not going to. Once he levels up, he goes to a 4-3, and then he gets Overwhelm, but so does his equipment. So if you decide to unequip him, you can give another unit that quick attack and overwhelm combo. Once he levels up, he gets attack. Give me 1/1 for each equipped ally this round. So the more units you have equipped, the stronger Jax is when he attacks. And his level up requirement is equipped allies have struck for 12 or more damage. You normally can get this off pretty fast with Jax, often in the first 1 to 2 turns. Now his champion spell is Counter-Strike, 3-cost burst. Give Jax barrier this round and forge him. Now the forge mechanic, not really used anywhere else in Jax's deck other than this, but if you play Ornn, you'll know what this mechanic is. So grant an ally 1/1. If the ally is equipped, grant it to their item instead. So essentially the card is still getting 1/1, but if they have an equipment and then that unit dies, those stats aren't lost because they're on the equipment, so you can put that on a new unit and that unit will now benefit from those extra stats. Taking a look at his star powers now. So for your 3rd star, we have allies have attack, grant me 1/1. If I'm equipped, also grant my equipment 2 power. Now for the 1-star version of this, it's allies have attack, grant me 1 power. And if I'm equipped, also grant my equipment 1 power. So you're only getting health once you have them at 3 stars. So just know that all of Jax's units, especially before they get to their 3-star, aren't scaling up their health. So they're still going to be fairly weak and easy to kill. But that's not really an issue because you're 2-star plus 1 starting mana. When an equipped ally dies, draw 1. Good way of not running out of cards. But then since your whole deck is so cheap, you normally still have the mana to play more units. And since you're buffing up your units with permanent buffs every time they are attacking, you're wanting to attack as many times as possible, and this really helps you scale up quite quickly. But even if the unit does die, since half the stats are being saved on their equipment, you can then equip another unit, transferring over all of those saved stats, so it can work out quite nicely. Taking a look at his starting deck, let's start off with the Ionian Hookmaster and the Improvise mechanic. So a lot of Jax units have this improvise of when I'm summoned, I improvise. Now, like it says right here, choose 1 of 2 random options from a depleting pool of equipment and equip it to this ally. And then if the ally wasn't played from hand, so if you just summoned this unit with some other effect, it just equips a random equipment instead. So if you look here, this is all of the improvised weaponry, and each one of these can only be created once per game. So whenever you improvise, it's going to show you 2 of these options randomly, and then you get to choose 1 of them to equip to your unit. And then if you improvise another unit, they'll again be shown 2 of these options other than the card you've already created, and they get to select what you want. Now, there are some very good cards in here, such as the Upcycled Rake. This is one you're normally wanting to get because it has Scout. letting you attack twice, which is obviously very strong from your star powers. This is the one you want to normally choose if you're given the opportunity to, but then most of them are just some stats plus a random keyword. Be careful when you see the Shepherd's Authority. As you see, it has the most amount of stats, but it has can't block as a modifier. So don't throw this on your unit thinking that they'll be great for blocking, and then you end up not being able to block with them. All decent equipment though, and this is all being automatically equipped when you are improvising a unit. But yeah, whenever you play a improvised unit, you're going to give the option of 2 of these to choose, but as you're choosing cards, your selection is going to get less and less. So if you keep avoiding a certain equipment, you're probably going to have to choose it sooner or later. But yeah, whenever you see the improvised mechanic, just know that this is the selection of relics, or not relics, the selection of equipment that you're going to be given access to. So again, looking at the starting deck, the Ionian Hookmaster, it has Barrier, 2 cost. This also has Studded Leather. For some reason, the starting deck screen isn't able to show you more than 1 item on a card. Kind of annoying, especially when you have maxed out champions. So just know that this card also will get these Studded Leather. So it's really a 1-2. With that barrier being really nice for giving you at least 1 round of protection. Going back to the top, we have the Bloodthirsty Marauder, 1 cost, 3/1 with Challenger. Pretty decent card, especially once you put a equipment on it. We have Catch, 1 cost Burst, give an ally 1/1 this round, or equip it with an equipment in hand that costs 2 or less. Good versatility there, also generating that 1 cost Poro. Next up, we have Desert Duel, 3 cost Slow. Give an enemy -2 power this round, and then an ally and that enemy strike each other with the Ardent Sensor, so granting the top ally in your deck 3/3. Nice way to get rid of enemy targets. Up next, we have Merciless Hunter, 3 cost Fearsome, 4/2. Play grant an enemy vulnerable with Quick Attack. Another solid card that, while it doesn't have equipment on its own, throwing some equipment on there will really help it out. Next up, we have the Piltover Castaway. This card is actually a 2 cost, but again, it's not showing the second upgrade. So it's a 2/1 with a tune, and then when I'm summoned, improvise. With all these improvised units, you're probably thinking they have a very low stat pool, but just remember those stats are going to be increased by whatever equipment they are improvising with. Up next, we have the Wandering Shepherd with Phage, and when you play him, pick an ally, improvise it, or if you don't, I improvise. So when you play this, you have the option of either choosing another unit to give a random equipment to, or you can do it for the card itself. So if you have some of the other units that are very strong, but you want to put an item on there, you can use this unit to do it. And then last up, we have the Combat Cook, 4 cost, 2/2 with regenerating. And then when I'm summoned, I improvise and Forge Me. So you are getting one of those random equipment and then immediately improving it with 1/1. Overall, your deck works out quite well together. You have a little bit of removal with Desert Duel, decent combat trick with Catch, and then just in general, very strong units that can really help you control the game. If you like a more unit-focused build, then Jax is great for that. Taking a look at relics now. So a great starting relic for Jax is actually the Rageblade attack grant me 1/1. Jax's stats aren't crazy at the start of the game, and he can normally be taken off the board fairly easily. So using the Rageblade in addition to your star powers to help him scale up can be quite good. Banshee's Veil also works out decently well, because there's a lot of times that the enemy will just like Mystic Shot your Jax as soon as you play him, before you even have the chance to attack to increase his stats. That's another good option right there. Challenger also works out pretty well, because remember, Jax is going to have Quick Attack from his equipment, so having that Quick Attack Challenger combo works out pretty well. For relics, the one I kind of like the most is the Crown Guard Inheritance when I level up Rally. You can normally level up Jax in the first 2 rounds, and then from that rally you can normally end the game. So Crown Guard Inheritance works out really well. Gale Force also is decent. The one issue with Gale Force though is that you're resetting all of Jax's stats when he gets recalled, and your star powers are all about buffing up your units. So while Gale Force can be fine, I actually prefer Crown Guard Inheritance for Jax, as the Scout only lets Jax attack with that Scout attack, but Rally lets your whole board attack again. So you can play around with it if you have both of them available. I actually think Crown Guard Inheritance works out better in most situations for Jax, and it's much easier to get. The Bounty Hunter's Renown or any stats relics like the Fist or the Warhammer are pretty good for Jax just because he has, again, pretty low stats at the start of the game. So making sure that he can start his scaling and he doesn't get taken off the board right away can be quite nice. Troll King's Crown allies have Overwhelm. This is very good. While Jax does get Overwhelm once he levels up, quite often he'll still get blocked by smaller units before you level up, and you're actually wasting a lot of extra damage. And the fact that this then goes to all of your allies, not just Jax himself, this is great for helping you end the game very early, really pushing your advantage of all of your cheap units. Normally what I would go with first would be Crown Guard Inheritance plus Troll King's Crown, and then throwing on a stat relic afterwards, or using something like Banshee's Veil or Rage Blade to help him scale up. Another relic that can be decent for you is the Corrupted Star Fragment support. Kill my supported ally, grant me its stats and keywords. This works even with equipment. So you're consuming all the stats that are on that equipment, but the equipment itself actually isn't getting consumed. So for example, you could have Jax consume a unit that has the scout equipment on it, and while the unit will get consumed, the equipment will go back in your hand, and you can then put that on another unit. So you can somewhat cheese the system with not actually losing all of your stats and keywords, even though you are consuming the target with the Star Fragment. Shade Leaf, also not bad if you want to focus more on your units and giving them elusive. That'll really help mitigate the one weakness of most of them having very low health pools but very high attack pools. Blade Rack is also a nice alternative to Troll King's Crown if you don't have it, or some people just like the control you get with Blade Rack a little bit more. Making sure all your units are getting blocked by the appropriate targets can be quite nice and really gives you great removal, as that's something you are somewhat lacking in your deck. Alright, that's it for the relics I wanted to highlight. Jax is a very versatile champion, so definitely play around with other relics as well. There's a lot of fun, different ways you're able to build him. Let's go take a look now at powers as well as support champions for Jax. Taking a look at powers now, up first we have Quick Draw. Cards you draw cost 1 less this round. Since you have some amount of built-in draw, and then since all of your cards are already so cheap, this will really help you flood your board at the very beginning with a lot of cheap units, letting you overwhelm your opponent even more than you already do. Up next, Crush. Allies have Overwhelm. If you're not wanting to use the Troll King's Crown, this is a great way to make sure all of your units get that Overwhelm, really helping you end games much sooner. Then we have Enfeebling Strike. When you damage an enemy, reduce its power by the damage dealt. Great defensive ability, especially if you have Quick Attack, which Jax does. Since you strike the unit before they strike you, if you don't outright kill them, you strike them and then reduce down their power so they can't end up killing you in return. Next up, we have the best defense. Allies have attack, grow my health to match my power. Definitely one of the best powers in the game for Jax. Like we've touched on several times, your units have very high attack pools but very low health pools. This mitigates that one weakness, making your units now both very, very strong offensively, but also quite good defensively as well, as long as they've been able to attack. The next, Domination Round Start Rally. You're wanting to attack as many times as possible with Jax, as every time you attack, your units are scaling up, and you're also wanting to make sure you're keeping the pressure on the opponent, and this is absolutely great for that. Sorcery Round Start, refill your spell mana. You do have a couple spells, so making sure you don't need to worry about playing your spells with your normal mana, and you can use that for your units and just save that spell mana for those spells and equipment. Does work out quite nice for you. Next up, we have out of the gates, game start, summon a 2-cost unit from your deck. Your 2-cost units are very strong with being Jax himself or a improvise unit. This works out absolutely great for you. Next up, we have the Craftsman Favor. Round start, create a fleeting time and dedication in hand. So what that does, 1-cost spell that lets you forge an ally every single round. So increasing their stats by 1/1, or if they have an equipment, it's buffing up that equipment by 1/1. Really nice way to buff up your units and then be able to transition those buffs onto another unit if the first one happens to die. And then we have Overprepared. Game start, create a random equipment in hand. It costs 2 less. Normally that's going to make the equipment free, and this is a great way to equip some of your units that don't start off with Improvise. Alright, that's it for some of the powers we wanted to highlight. Let's go take a look at support champions. So there's a lot of different champions that'll work out great for Jax, and normally you want to look at the upgrades the champions are bringing themselves or what items are actually on there, but here are some factors you might want to consider when looking at support champions. So first we have equipment. You're obviously an equipment-based deck. Any support champions that also have equipment in there really work out quite well for you. And next up we have cheap and aggressive. So any champion that is 1 to 2 cost and an aggressive unit themselves, or they come with aggressive units, is great. You really want to double down on your strengths of putting the pressure on early. So for some specific champions, we have Vayne. She also is an equipment-based champion, and she can make free attacks with her tumble, which just feeds into what you're already wanting to do. Then for cheap and aggressive, we have Lucian. 1 cost champion with quick attack. Throwing an equipment on him really makes him into a monster and can work quite well for you with trying to end the game as soon as possible. That's it for support champions as well as this guide. I hope it helped you out. If it did, definitely like and subscribe. We're trying to push for 10K subscribers by the end of the year. We have a long way to go, so any help you can give is greatly appreciated.